So welcome everyone, thanks so much for joining me today on the Synergy Women podcast. My name's Niky Hamilton. I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today a conversation about the struggles and ups and downs in life. So isn't it true that when you're going through perhaps a challenging time in your life, when you're down, you kind of feel like, I don't think I'm ever going to get up. I don't know how I'm going to make it. This is too hard. And isn't it also true that when you're having a great day or you're on top of the world or things are going well for you, you kind of feel like, well, nothing could actually ever go wrong. Nothing could go wrong to me. Everything's just trundling along just perfectly. And so it's true that when we're down, we think we're never going to get up. And when we're up, we think we're never going to come down. And ultimately, the nature of life is that our life is filled with ups and downs. Some of them feel heavier and deeper. But if you even backpedal in your mind throughout your entire life, so if you think back, even back to kindergarten or first grade in primary school, a good day for you might have been making a new best friend when you thought, oh, this is the best day ever, I've got this new friend. And then it could be that within weeks your new friend has decided not to be friends with you anymore. And suddenly, as comical as that sounds to us now on reflection, to a 5-year-old, that's actually a deep hurt. That suddenly feels like a huge life struggle. And then your life progresses through your teenage years, where there's lots of ups and downs, through your 20s and 30s, where the ups and downs change. But isn't it true that ups and downs are actually just a part of life, and everybody experiences them? And I do recall in my own journey, and I think some of you may have already listened to various podcasts where I share that our son passed away. And I do recall for many years after this feeling like I was at the bottom of the ocean, completely unable to breathe, had brain fog, memory loss. I was grief-stricken with depression. I had bouts of terrible anxiety. And I truly thought, I don't think I'm ever going to recover. I really don't think I'm ever going to find my way out of this. This is such a deep, dark, horrible struggle. And so if you're in a place at the moment where you feel like you're in a deep hole and that you're really struggling, this podcast is dedicated just to you. And like a lot of podcasts, I like to start perhaps with just a short story. And that story is about my travelling days. And I'm really, really fortunate that over the period of my life, throughout my 20s and 30s, I was fortunate enough to be able to have the opportunity to do a lot of travel. And this is before COVID lockdowns and before travel restrictions. I took off to the UK probably my early 20s and travelled through most of Europe and parts of Asia and Southeast Asia. And one of these trips that I went on was on a trip through Nepal. And so a girlfriend and I had travelled through Southeast Asia and made our way up to Kathmandu, where we were met with another one of our friends. And the three of us decided to do Annapurna Circuit, which is a long trek through the Annapurna region. And we decided to do it by ourselves with just a porter to help us with our gear. We were quite adventurous. And we packed all of our gear up in Kathmandu and took just a day pack each and packed the rest for our porter. We kept our luggage really to a minimum. I think I had 2 shirts with me, and set off on our way. Now, at the beginning of this trek, I will say I was a little bit apprehensive, but also super excited. I couldn't wait to see the Himalayas. I was really excited about that, and I love climbing mountains. But I soon discovered that in the first 5 days of our trip through the Annapurna region, I'll say 5, it might have been 6, in actual fact we didn't see any mountains. We got up each day, we climbed steadily upward through sort of a thick forest, I guess, with no views. The trail was very, very dusty. We were passed probably every hour or so by herds of donkeys carrying things up, which would kick up a lot of dust and make it really difficult to breathe. So I ended up covering my whole face and mouth with like a sarong or a scarf of some sort just to be able to breathe. It was dark, it was cold in the forest, and then hot when we came out of the forest. I started to get blisters on my feet. My legs were really hurting. It was a steady uphill climb constantly for hours every single day. And after the 5th day, I started to think to myself, what have I done? I'm not seeing any mountains. I'm covered in dust. I haven't had a nice shower or a hot bath for 5 days straight. This is a challenge. This is a real challenge. And then it was on, I think, the 6th day where through the forest, through the trees, there was a little break in the trees and we saw our first glimpse of a mountain, and it was spectacular. And I thought, oh, this is what I'm here for. I'm so excited. Oh, finally we get to see something. And then our guide shared with us, oh, actually that mountain that we're going to be climbing is probably another 10 days walk away, or 8 days walk away. And my heart sank just a little bit. I thought, oh God, this is really challenging. And to top it off, of course, you stay in beautiful Nepalese tea houses. So the Nepalese people are absolutely beautiful, and they share parts of their houses for all of the trekkers that come through. But when I did this trekking, this is 20 years ago now, so it might be different now, there was very little access to hot water, if anything. Access to healthy food was a challenge. Obviously in the mountains it's very difficult to grow anything fruit and veggies wise, so you're really stuck with a diet of lentils and rice for the entire trek. If you have a shower at the end of the day, you're lucky, but mostly it's a cold wash. And I didn't actually, I will confess, wash my hair for the entire 3-week journey, which meant that I actually created 2 plaits down my side just to hold it steady. And I think by the end of the 3-week trek, it was actually like cardboard. So it was a really challenging time. So anyway, after the 5th day, we caught a first glimpse of a mountain. We thought, okay, we're reaching the mountains, we can do it, keep walking. We start our climb, and we're catching more glimpses of mountains as we steadily climb up. The climb gets a little easier. I start to feel a little bit fitter, but to top it off now, we're starting to reach a little bit of altitude. And I don't know if any of you have walked through altitude, when you're climbing in altitude, in actual fact, it can be very, very challenging because due to the low oxygen, you just don't have any energy. It's kind of like you feel like you're walking through mud, like dragging your legs along, and you simply cannot walk any faster than what you're doing. If anything, it's a challenge simply just to put one foot in front of the other, and you think, oh, what am I doing? Have I really done the right thing by coming on this trek? So you've got the top off of poor nutrition, challenging dust and donkeys, heavy legs, laboured breathing, and life starts to feel like, I don't know when we're actually going to reach the top. Are we going to reach the top? Is this ever going to... When's the beautiful view happening? That's all I was chasing at that time. And I do recall one occasion as we started to climb higher and the trees started to disappear, so we saw more mountain views. Actually became very hot during the day, so you'd sweat a lot during the day, but also would be freezing at night time. So I have a strong recollection of being this end of walk, sweaty body, but the sun's going down, it's starting to get really cold, and we find a tea house to stay in, and the beautiful woman there said, look, I've got hot water for you. And that was just like a miracle. It was like, oh, are you serious? Oh my God, hot water. I would have paid $1 million for a bath at that point. And so she promised me some hot water. She said she'd bring me some hot water. I went into the shower area and started to take my shoes off, and the concrete was like ice underneath my feet. And she brings me a little tiny, the smallest saucepan that you can ever envisage. She brings this saucepan of water to me and places it on the bathroom floor, and I say, thank you very much, and she leaves the room. And I recall very clearly staring at that saucepan thinking, can I fit both feet in that? And can I squat down in that and pretend I'm in a bath? And being really, really disappointed to realise that there's just no way that is ever going to make a bath for me. So that was my my one warm shower that I had, or warm bath that I had in that entire trek. So like I said, plenty of challenges along the way. And then to top it off, as we started to reach even further, we got to our final night before our final ascent to the very top of the pass that we were going over. So the Annapurna circuit is a circle, but it passes over a big, tall mountain pass that's about 5,500 metres. So we'd been heading toward that for the last 8 days or so. So pretty tired by then. And as we reached the night before our big mountain pass climb, you actually don't sleep at night. So if anyone's travelled at altitude or climbed at altitude, there's something that happens, and I'm not sure what it is, but sleep just completely disappears, and you lie awake quite a lot of the night. I mean, you still have a rest, but you just don't sleep. So you're tired, your nutrition's not great, You haven't had a hot bath or a shower for I don't know how long. You're covered in dust. You've been breathing donkey dust for I don't know how long, struggling to get through, and it starts to feel like this is really hard work. And then came the final day where we had to ascend our mountain climb to get to the top of the pass. And that pass day was a good 10-hour day. So we actually had to get up at about 4 o'clock in the morning and start the climb up. Otherwise the winds would pick up and we wouldn't see the mountains. And that climb was one of the hardest climbs that I've done. It took, I don't know how, probably 6 or 7 hours. I can't remember exactly. I really was taking a breath every single step. Every single step was laboured and slow. And I was really questioning myself at that point. And as I started to turn a corner to reach the top, I glanced around me and saw the most spectacular view. Something that I'll never forget. It was completely breathtaking. And I took those final steps and finally made it to the top of that pass, which was the highest climb that we had to do, which was 5,500 metres. And I just felt this feeling of complete and utter exhilaration. That's all I can describe it as. Complete, heart-opening exhilaration. I nearly cried. I felt joyous. I felt accomplished. I felt awe-inspired. I felt like that whole struggle with the breathing and the dust and the donkeys and the food and my sore feet and my sore legs and my heavy backpack and the no sleep, all of these things that I had worked through, I had come to a point where it was like, here I am. Oh my God, this is just absolutely amazing. So I've got an amazing photo that I love up at the mountain where I just look like I'm absolutely over the moon. And we stayed there for probably a good 15-20 minutes before we then had to descend down the other side, simply because the oxygen levels would have been getting too low, and we needed to start to descend to avoid any kind of altitude sickness. So that was my mountain climb experience in Nepal. We had another few days to climb, to descend, probably another 4 or 5 days, I guess, to descend out. And it's a trip that I'll never forget, not because of the exhilaration and the climb, but also because of the struggles. And it was a combined struggle and challenge and exhilaration all at once. The Nepalese people were beautiful people as hosts, and it was a moment in my life that I am hugely grateful for experiencing. And I feel grateful that I know there's not many people out there that have had the chance to experience that, and I loved it. Now, I'd like to just pause on that story and fast forward, say, another 5 years. And 5 years later, I'm living in London and I'm having the opportunity to fly in and out of Europe pretty easily on the EasyJet deals. I think the flights are about £5 at that point in time. This is back in the 90s. And my then boyfriend and I decided to take a trip to Switzerland. Now, Switzerland is absolutely pristine. The mountains are spectacular, really, really beautiful. So we took, I think, a 5-day trip to Switzerland, and we were just planning on doing some day walks. And one of these day walks was up to a really beautiful mountain peak, and I can't recall the name of it, but we walked a short distance, but the rest of the climb was actually in a gondola. So we hopped in the gondola with maybe 20 other people, I guess, and the gondola took its slow ascent to the top. And I looked around at the views, and I will say the mountains in Switzerland are absolutely pristine, like nothing I've experienced, beautiful. And we ascended in the gondola and got to the top, and the doors just opened, and we stepped out onto the viewing platform. And yes, it was a bit chilly, but we had a nice lunch packed for our view top experience. And I looked around, and it was absolutely exhilarating. It was beautiful, but there was just a little piece somehow missing, in that I felt that I hadn't worked for it. It was like I didn't climb for this. I didn't experience what it was to feel accomplished when you finally reach the top, when you finally take that final step up and take a big breath in and go, wow, I'm here. And that's not to dismiss my trip to Switzerland, and it's certainly not to dismiss the views or the experience, and I'm certainly not lacking in gratitude for that, but it was a real contrast in my mind of how it is to experience when you simply get a lift to the top and there you are, as opposed to the long, heavy, hard walk when you arrive. And so any of you that are currently navigating a struggle, and you're in the deep dark forest getting covered in donkey dust, and you're carrying a heavy bag and your feet hurt and you can't breathe and you haven't had a good meal and you just want a hot bath, when you're at that point, know that your climb is going to be worth it. Because ultimately I have had many people, and we all know people like this, but I have had people in my life where I observe from the outside and it appears like things just arrive on their lap. I've even had a friend that we used to call a master manifester. It would be like she'd think of something and wish for something and it would just arrive. And although that's admirable and that's beautiful to experience, I'm sure, there is something that brings you a great depth when you climb. You have a natural built-in empathy and understanding, a rawness, and a real humility when you've realised that sometimes things are worth climbing for, and that you have the strength and that you can do it. And I wouldn't wish my struggles away at all. I feel like my struggles have made me a more understanding person. They've given me a depth in my nature that I don't think I would have had I not had my struggles. So even in the depths of your struggle, know that on the other side, when you reach your journey or your destination, that you'll have more depth, more authenticity, more humanity about you, and you'll be able to connect with others in a way that you have never been able to otherwise if you hadn't experienced your struggles. So I guess this is more of a heartfelt expression of love to those who are struggling right now. The 3 tips that I can give you when you're going through a struggle. Firstly, actually, let's start with the 2 myths. The 2 myths are that when we're on top, we feel like we're never going to go down. We feel like nothing's going to happen to us. So the greatest myth of humanity is that nothing bad's ever going to happen to me. And that's just not true. Throughout your life, something's going to happen and you're going to struggle. And that's the nature of life. And for some people, it seems to be harder, and others, they seem to slide on through, like catching the gondola up and just looking at the view. But I can guarantee you, if you've been given a struggle, that your life climb will be so much deeper and so much more authentic than if you were just handed things on a plate. So the first myth is that life is not going to be a struggle, that when you're on top nothing bad will ever happen. That's not true. The other myth of life is that when you're in the depths of darkness you'll never find your way out, and that's not true either. So life goes up and down. It happens in nature, and when you're down you feel like you're never going to get up. So if you're in that place at the moment where you feel like you're struggling and you can't find your way through, the 3 tips that I can give you. First tip, number 1, one day at a time, one step at a time. I remember very clearly in my walk through Nepal, putting my shoes on in the morning over blistered feet, thinking I just wish I had another Band-Aid, this is not working, this is really hurting. And the only thing I could do is just put one foot in front of the other. So if you're struggling, put your shoes on, take one step, and then take another step. And just take one step at a time. That's the first tip. The second tip, if you are climbing a mountain and you're struggling at the moment, don't forget to rest and appreciate the view along the way. It's really, really common to look at the top and think, oh, it's so far away, I'm never going to get there, without stopping and looking down and around you and appreciating how far you've come. So there was a moment in my climb in Nepal where we had an afternoon where we arrived somewhere early from at a tea house, and we sat there with cups of tea and looked at the view, and it was just like, wow, this is pretty special. How lucky are we? So how far have we come? So if you are navigating your way through and it feels like an uphill battle, don't forget to stop and rest. You're allowed to do that. Stop and rest, and then look back and go, oh, actually, I've come a fair distance. I've still got a fair way to go. That's okay. I'm not where I want to be. That's okay. But look how far I've come, and start to appreciate and reward yourself with that. So one day, one step at a time. Take a rest. Appreciate the view along the way. The last tip is just know in your heart that when you reach where you want to be in your life, that you will be stronger, you'll be more capable, you'll be more intuitive, you'll have greater insight, greater connection, and a huge understanding of what it is to experience life. You'll have a more colourful viewpoint and a more colourful life experience than others. So there has to be some joy in that. So I do hope that this podcast has given you some ideas and some tips to take away today if you are currently going through a life struggle. I hope to share more with you along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you'd like to know more about me or the Rise Up method or the Rise Up retreats that I run for women who are going through a life challenge, then you can explore my website. Thank you.